nonviolence, and that I think the U.S. policy is trying to catch up a pace with what's going on, and they do have a hypocritical policy with Israel. It makes for schizophrenia because the U.S. does want to support democratic forces, and I do think that the many things that Secretary Clinton has been saying for pro-democratic forces in the Middle East and support of the rebels is really wonderful, and I think that the only other thing is that the U.S. I think it was very good that Senators McCain and Lieberman were in Tahrir Square yesterday. I think that's a very good sign.
Okay, Jerry, let me ask the ambassador then. This, obviously this is a delicate role here that America's playing, but this issue that Jerry raised about the Palestinian-Israeli dynamic, the whole thing at the beginning of the show, I was talking about how Barack Obama came in saying there will be no settlements, and of course then the veto was used, sending a totally opposite message, a complete flip-flop, and it must come across as very hypocritical.
Well, I think that on the Israel issue, of course, there is a broad agreement in the United States in terms of strong support for Israel. And there has been a long tradition of arguing that perhaps the UN is not the best place to deal with some of the Arab-Israel issues. It's best done through the direct negotiations between the parties. On occasion, we have either abstained or even have supported action there, but that has been rare. I think the sentiments expressed in the resolution is exactly what the administration supports. I think the president stated, like the previous administration, that it was against new settlements, that they were illegal, and that they were in contravention to the desire for a peace agreement.
But then what is said and what is done are two totally different things.
Well, I think that the doing is sometimes a number of factors get involved, and I was not there, so I don't know what it is. Sometimes some member states do not want a resolution. They want to isolate the United States by putting a word in there that they know will cross a red line for the United States, or it may be that given the Israeli nervousness right now about what's going on in the region, including with Egypt, that this was the timing was an issue that they thought at this time you don't want to put further pressure on Israel. So there may have been various factors, but those are tactical issues. I think on the strategic level, the policy on settlements is quite clear.
Okay, well, two emails I'll put back to back here that we got. Yes. One from Junaid Malik, who wrote into our Facebook page, and Junaid says, "These revolutions were by the people, for the people. The Israeli-Palestinian issue will probably remain stuck in stalemate." Then a follow-up from Arthur Musazizi, who wrote in saying, "America still has a firm grip on the Egyptian military. Nothing has changed, and Palestinians still are not free to cross the border into Egypt." So again, for what's going on elsewhere in the Middle East, it seems that there'll still be this grinding point with the Israeli-Palestinian situation.
I think it may become even more difficult for the United States as a result of the democratization, which is positive, and I think that the U.S., although one could say it was catching up to some degree with events on the ground, is playing a positive role in encouraging governments not to use violence and encouraging Arab governments to reform, to accommodate. But one consequence of democratization is probably going to be that the population of the Arab world is generally takes a tougher view of the Israeli-Palestinian issue than some of the authoritarian leaders do or did. So therefore, I think dealing with a democratic Middle East on this issue, among other positive things that will happen, this is going to be a complicating and a difficult factor.
More pressure on the U.S. on
There will be more pressure, more difficulty, but hopefully one can deal with it effectively through engagement and working even harder to get an Israeli Arab-Palestinian settlement.
Well, less than a minute to go, Ambassador. Will the U.S. accept governments that form in the new Middle East if they are democratically formed? We've seen with Hamas, Hezbollah, that hasn't always been the case.
Sure. Well, of course. I mean, that's one thing is about elections, that the elections have to take place at a time when there is a level playing field politically, where different groups can effectively compete. One idea has been that maybe in some places where elections have happened too quickly, and there was not a level playing field that produced results that have not been truly representative. But I think the U.S. Can work with the democratic Middle East, would welcome it. This is something that both works for U.S. interests and for U.S. ideals.
Well, Ambassador, never enough time. I will speak to you again soon, I hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Great to be with you.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you, and thank you for being with us too. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us feedback on the topics and post your questions and comments. On the next show, women in the revolution. They've been out on the streets making their voices heard, but what role will they get to play in their country's political future? Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.
Malaysia has created the world's tallest self-installing wellhead platform and designed the largest and most advanced racecourses. Discover Malaysia's service excellence at the Malaysia Services Exhibition Abu Dhabi. Register with Martrade.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines
most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
is the inside story, at this time on Al Jazeera.
As protests, violence, and the call for political reform spreads across the Arab world, Al Jazeera's in-depth coverage of events on the ground brings you the news as it breaks. Ongoing coverage of the Libya uprising on Al Jazeera.
Afghanistan is faced with a huge challenge.
Relations have gone really sour between us and our allies.
We have inflicted considerable damage on the enemy.
The people who make international headlines.
Ultimately, the truth will out.
They want to stop this publication of information that embarrasses them.
Make time for Sir David Frost. Frost over the world. At this time on Al Jazeera.
The relocation of the Ahmadiyya has magnified the issue of religious intolerance in Indonesia. Is this inevitable in a multicultural society? And is the government turning a blind eye?
101 East at this time on Al Jazeera.
For the people here, this has started to become normal. It's flooded every single year for the last 20 years. There's no electricity, there's no streaming water. This is the forgotten part of Indonesia. Here on the beach in Banda Aceh, young couples like to hang out. But if they're not married, the Sharia police will catch them.
Okay. Where are you guys come from?
Dari TV Al Jazeera. These people have a very clear message for their president. George Bush is not welcome in Indonesia, they say. Stepfasen, Al Jazeera.
Gaddafi's forces attempt to fight back in Libya. A rebel-held ammunition dump is bombed, but the opposition defend their strongholds.
I'm Tony Bertley in Benghazi, where the opposition is hoping for the best, a peaceful solution